We're on the front porch of a 101-year-old house in the Montrose neighborhood on Lovett Boulevard between Taft and Whitney, and we've been here for over 40 years, 47 years in service to the city of Houston, powered by the people that entire length of time. And those of you who've been sustaining KPFT through those years, a very special thanks to you, and a challenge to those of you listening, wondering about it. It's your investment in KPFT that gives us the power to even be here, and we thank you for that. I'm Duane Bradley.
And I'm Marlo Bluel. Soccer history goes back to the 1800s, and a similar game was also played by Native Americans before that. But it never got the status of baseball, football, and basketball. Still, Houston, as the fourth largest city and a big Hispanic population, has a soccer team, men and women. Joining us today is Glenn Davis, radio announcer for the Dynamo team, and former KPFTer, I believe. Is that correct?
You got that right. I got a little deja vu coming back here in the studio. This is
Welcome
amazing.
Back.
2013, I got a radio start here because of Duane Bradley and giving me the opportunity to see if a soccer program or a football program could work here in Houston, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that was in part due to a mutual friend, Rad Rich. And
Rad Rich.
Saw Rad yesterday,
nice.
And he may be showing up here to later on. He's got some interesting sports ideas, and so we appreciate him and his interest in the beautiful game, the sport of soccer, known as football around most of the planet, but here in America. Well, we have to call it soccer because you say football and people think of the Texans, the Cowboys, the American football kind of thing. Maybe you can help us differentiate that. This soccer is true football, right? It's a democratic sport, small d democratic, in that it is egalitarian, in that it is something that crosses class boundaries. It's played on every country on the planet plays soccer because all you need is legs and a ball, right?
Yeah, listen, from an economic perspective, it's very, very simple for this game to be played in every corner of the world. When I sometimes I roll my eyes a little bit, but I do kind of get it when somebody wins the Super Bowl. You know, we're world champions. Well, nobody around the world really. Number one, can afford to play American football. Number two, do. And it is very American, and I'm not beating on the NFL, but it is a game of global diversity. It is a game that is played in streets. It's very simple to be played, and that's why it made a perfect fit, obviously, here to do a show here because of the reach around the world. So it is the true world sport. The only other things that I think bring people together in a bigger and grander way than the sport of football is probably food and music. Those would be my other two choices. You guys might have another one, but that's where I fit its influence, its power to do good. It has the power to do bad sometimes. It's just such a beautiful sport. And as you mentioned, it is connected very much here in Houston. And by the way, it's not just the Mexican and Hispanic and Latino population. It's the 150,000 Nigerians that live here. It's burgeoning populations and all these different ethnic groups, which in fact are all possibility for a professional soccer team that's being run here, the Houston Dynamo and the Houston Dash.
Well, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, high ceiling.
What's being done on that then?
Well, I mean, that's the challenge for the two pro clubs is look, I think there's steps being made. I think it's taken a little while to get there to make the Houston Dynamo a diverse team with a lot of different cultural players on it. It's got an owner now that's from Mexico and Gabriel Brenner. This is much different than the days that I played where, in the 80s you're playing for a professional soccer team. You played in a high school stadium or empty NFL stadiums around the country. I remember playing games in the Pontiac Silverdome with 4,000 people in a 90,000 seat stadium, and now we've got this incredible infrastructure here. I every time I go into that stadium downtown BBVA Compass, and I pinch myself because I just have such a hard time believing that this beautiful gem of a stadium is here. And it was built with the priority of soccer in mind, which was never even a conversation in the 80s. Never.
Well, it does seem, kind of interesting that both of you developed this love in a place where it was sort of a loveless garden, let's say. I mean, soccer was just not, it just wasn't the cool thing to do. How did you do that? And who was your soccer hero when you were growing up?
Well, ethnic groups have a big, I grew up in New Jersey, so there's a lot of ethnic pockets. So when I played youth soccer in New Jersey, we might go play a team that was full of Scottish kids, and the entire team would be Scots, or the entire team would be Portuguese. So we would see these differing styles of play and what it meant to people in and around big cities. And that's where it was when I was growing up in the 70s. Now it's infiltrated into the suburbs where you're getting national team players from Mississippi. It's incredible. There's all these pioneering sort of leaders that have spread the lore of the game through coaching and working with youth, and its exposure now has grown to such levels here with not only MLS, but with all the people from around the world that have come here and have brought the things that they love, and one of those is football.
Mm-hmm. And what was your soccer journey like? I mean, you grew up, as you say, in New Jersey. It's a good thing. I did too, and we're down here now and loving it. So soccer was a kid's sport. It was like an intramural sport back then. And
yeah, kind of.
What was your soccer journey beyond playing it as a youth?
Yeah, we had organized soccer as a youth. I had the beginning of the journey came with one man crossing my path, and that was a Scottish gentleman who lived outside of Manhattan in an area called Kearny, New Jersey. It was all Scottish. He decided to take a bunch of kids from the suburbs and work with them consistently. He grew the passion and our love of the game, and a lot of these kids from a neighborhood, myself included, ended up and are still involved in the sport in a lot of ways. I mean, this is 20 years now I've worked in television, calling World Cups, Olympics, working on the youth side, coaching, taking his lessons and passing them on. It's a love affair, and it's also a grand, I have some of the greatest fortune. If it all stopped right now, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I mean, I've traveled to other countries to call games. I've played soccer matches against top clubs from Mexico. I've worked with all these wonderful young kids. I've had experiences which are beyond belief. I'm hoping to have more of them, but I consider myself an incredibly fortunate man to be doing something my entire life around something that I love.
We have some interns that come here every Friday for Trey Magazine, and they all want to be you.
Wow.
Let me just tell you that right
That's
now.
flattering.
Well, how did you end up in Houston, Glenn? What brought you down here? I know I was hauled down here by Shell Oil and I couldn't escape as a kid, but
yeah, we all have an odyssey in life, don't we? We all have this journey we go on. There's significant moments in it that change the direction of the river and where you end up. So 1983, I'm playing in a league called the American Soccer League out of college. It's a professional league. Traveling around, it's not quite as luxurious and as exciting as it looks now in the Premier League or even Major League Soccer for that matter. But it was a big deal to me then, and it was a big deal to all of us. I'm playing with former captain of Hungary. I'm playing with veterans from the top leagues in England, so it is a big deal. The team folds, which was very commonplace back then. The league folds. It gets reformed, and Houston has a team, and I get picked up by Houston and come here with 3 or 4 of my teammates. And then the rest kind of is history. We battle through it in the 80s.
That was the Houston Hurricane?
This was the Houston Dynamos, with an S, which came after the Hurricanes, which came after the Houston Stars. So we have a lot of professional soccer history. We have 4 teams.
And we even had the Hot Shots.
And the Hot Shots was actually owned by Giorgio Berlenghi and Alfredo Brenner, who is the brother of now the current majority interest owner of the Dynamo, Gabriel Brenner. So there's a lot. There's so much history here. It's incredible.
Nice. I can remember coming to Houston as a junior in high school, wanting to do something, looking around and seeing that the things I did in California in high school, swimming and cross-country running and track, they were not of interest to me down here. So we got together, some kids out at Memorial High School, and we just put a note on a board and started a soccer team. We had to invent our uniforms. We had to get kicked off of school property and go play in a churchyard. We hauled ourselves to games. We went to meetings of this tiny little group of 2 or 3 schools in Houston, high schools that had teams back in the early 70s. and built what is now, I think, that was like the groundbreaking of this burgeoning movement of soccer. And you could see it back then because it was something that crossed all boundaries, that anyone could play, that anyone with an interest in sport that wanted to, run around and kick things could do it. And similarly, going off to college in the mid-'70s and doing the very same thing. There was no soccer team at Baylor when I went there. I put a note on a
there
bulletin
still isn't
board.
On the men's side. There is a women's team, but there isn't on the men's side. That's a whole other story. But by the way, what you're describing here in this story is the pioneering of the sport, and people like yourselves are a part of the growth of the game here. I mean, our community here in Houston has got so many brilliant soccer people that do it for the right reasons and are involved for the right reasons. And these are the types of stories that have sort of spread the web and the excitement of the sport now. And I mean, this is one of the great soccer cities in America. There's no There's reasons why the Copa Centenario is coming here. There's reasons why there's a pro team here. There's reasons why the NCAA championship will be here. There's reasons why the NWSL championship will be here. There's reasons why Mexican teams are consistently trying to pop in and out of Houston to play friendly matches. Promoters are coming out of the woodwork to place games here. The future here is incredibly bright, and the possibility is limitless.
Yeah, but Clint, they're not just following the money. I mean, has American soccer really gotten that good? Can we compete?
Are you talking about on the national team level at World Cups? Well, we got out of the round of we got out of group play the last two World Cups on the men's side. On the women's side, yes, we can compete because we're the world champions right now, and we have the number one female player in the world who happens to play here in Houston, Carly Lloyd. But I think there is some distress around the U.S. men's national team program right now because there's some confusion around it. Player development is not mature in this country. That responsibility will come upon the pro teams now in the future. You know, we're not taking young kids off the streets and turning them into super pros like Sergio Aguero and company. We still have a very differing system here, which ultimately that responsibility is going to fall locally on the Houston Dynamo. Why can't there one day be 6 local kids that are running out on the field in front of 20,000 people representing the Houston Dynamo? If the right youth development system's put together by the Dynamo, that will happen. You will see.
Well, of course, let's do talk about the women's team because the Dash is kicking it. You know it's true. And of
they
course,
played their first match the other day to over 7,000 folks there at the stadium.
Yeah, it was there. Great night. Great night.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room because that's money. And, of course, there's been a big hoopla lately.
Well, you mentioned Carly Lloyd.
Yeah.
She's part of...
What about their demands for equal pay? Is it ever going to happen?
Oh, I think you'll see in the coming months that they're going to be rewarded with more pay. I don't know if it's going to be equal, but it'll be more. And for me, I don't like how it's been pitted male against female. This is just my opinion. Listen, they've generated more revenue. They deserve to be paid more. I don't think there's any question. There's a couple of facts that people don't know. There is a collective bargaining agreement, and the women are the highest paid women's national team in the world here in the U.S. They get a base salary of around $72,000. Then they get paid again by U.S. Soccer because U.S. Soccer is trying to help subsidize some of the payments of the NWSL to keep that league afloat, which, by the way, is in its 4th year. That's history for a women's pro league.
Right.
So, there's 24 players earning a base of around $150,000. That's the highest paid women's national team in the world. The German national team doesn't get paid this kind of money, as successful as they are. So they are trailblazing, they are groundbreaking, and they do deserve to be paid more based on revenues, which they filed a complaint with the EEOC, and that complaint says, hey, it's wage discrimination against U.S. Soccer. And what's going to happen in the next couple months is, I guess, the lawyers and everybody involved is going to have to look at this and say, okay, do we base this on last year that was so successful, TV ratings going out of the world? I worked on that World Cup with Fox. The ratings and everything were unbelievable. That World Cup was amazing for women's soccer. Or is it over the span of the last 4 years? So, look, what they've done for the sport is amazing. What I believe these women in Houston with the Houston Dash can do will be amazing because they are the biggest assets these teams have.
Well, how do they do it for men's teams? How do they divide the revenue for men's teams?
Well, men's teams...
You said over a 4-year average.
It's a little bit different. You either get selected to the team or not. If you don't get selected to the team, you don't make any money. There's a little bit more of a risk. They do, in some ways, get paid more if they participate and play. But U.S. Soccer really hasn't come out and given us any of the numbers right now. They've decided to stay mum on the subject, and I think kind of wait it out here. There is a collective bargaining agreement the women are in now, but, you know, I think the soil is tilled for this opportunity here now to kind of to bring up the wage discrimination thing.
Well, and beyond the national teams, where arguably the women, I mean, no argument really, have been far more successful than the men. The men may get more popular attention in the newspapers. You know, males dominate the sports pages for the most part.
But there is a reason for that, because more are interested in men's soccer. That's a reality, and I don't want to say this in a way that gets anybody upset. That interest is growing on the women's side, and as that interest grows, there's more women coming in live to my shows. I want them in there. I want Carly Lloyd in my studio, who so graciously before the World Cup final does an interview with me. I want some of the younger players in there that nobody knows about to tell their stories, because the stories are amazing. And I think we're seeing the tide beginning to rise even more based on what the women's national team has done. Now the question is, the challenge of running a league on a daily basis is far different than just these beautiful big events which the U.S. women live up to every time. Whether it's a World Cup or an Olympics, they live up to it, let's face it.
Yeah.
But how does that translate back down to running a team on a daily basis and keeping momentum? That's a different challenge.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Glenn Davis, what is your favorite part about your job?
Oh, man. What's the favorite part about my job? I think game day, just game day, or live radio. Even this, I'm excited being here talking about soccer, because I can think back to the years when I played, you know, and I think we got on the front page of the Houston newspaper, which isn't even around anymore, the Post.
The Post.
When we got to the final, we made the front page. We were like, we were going nuts, you know. We were trying to hang off trees naked so that somebody would pay attention to us, you know. Not that worked. But you know, just being a part of the growth of this whole thing is just fascinating and mind-blowing. I didn't go to school to be on radio or to be in TV. I've been on television, I hate to say it, for 20 years. I mean, I guess that's good and can be bad as well. It's taken me all over the world. I've had some experiences calling games in Central America where I wasn't sure I was going to come out alive, that I can talk about. And I have all this stuff indelibly etched in my mind. I've just been fortunate to work in this sport that I love and who have competed in it, and I've been a pro at a time where I think they would kind of call us pioneers, you know, and I love seeing the current players reaping the benefits of this. It's hard for us to look back, you know. You don't want to look back too much. You do just enough, I think, to just have a little bit of a reminder, that's all.
Do you have a signature catchphrase?
Do I have you know, sometimes when games start, I'll say it's game on from whatever city we're in or stadium. I guess that kind of stuck with me. But you know, I go into these games. Not a lot of it is. Nothing is really pre-scripted. Except, you know, you kind of know on a pre-game show or a post-game show. You do have a format. But once a game starts, you know, it's really the game telling the story. And there's different ways of doing play-by-play now. And I think some people think it's about talking every minute. For me, I lay out and don't talk sometimes when there's beautiful crowd noise and images that don't need my words. And I think those are the moments that I've really helped kind of narrow down as I work at these crafts, radio and TV. You're always a work in progress. You can always get better.
That's awesome, Glenn Davis.
Glenn, what is your official title? I mean, we've introduced you as like the radio announcer for the Houston Dynamo, but I mean, you do.
That's kind of limited.
Your radio, your television.
I'm sorry.
You do the Dynamo. You do more than the Dynamo. I mean, Who's your employer, or
Well-
do you,
well,
or are you sort of like spread around through
Yeah.
a variety of different?
I'm freelance, like Bachman Turner Overdrive said. We love to work at nothing all day. Now, I'm just kidding. I do work very hard at this, and I shouldn't have said that because I think a lot of
Somebody's
people
listening.
think you just get dropped into these jobs. And if I told the story, which I do to some of the colleges and universities, it's about opportunity. It's about taking opportunity. But yeah, I
It's also
work
hard
for
work
a
and
number.
study, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was up. I did about an hour on the Dynamo Columbus game before I came here with a cup of coffee this morning because we have a game on Cube 57 tomorrow with a pre and post game show, and I'm looking at formats but. Yeah, I'm freelance, so I've worked for every network here in the United States, NBC, Fox. I'll be doing the Copa Centenario with Fox. ESPN, I do a ton of work for every year. And people think you work for these networks, and you do.
That
But you're
day,
freelance.
or-
Yeah. If I were to want to be full-time, I'd have to move to either coast. Houston's my town. I love this town. I want to see this sport even grow even more. So, yeah, I wear a lot of different hats, but I like it.
We're talking football with Glenn Davis here on the Open Journal today. Stepping outside the cube for just a minute to check on traffic with Patrick. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Patrick. We're back on the Open Journal in the Cube, and I'm Duane Bradley with Glenn Davis in the studio from the Houston Dynamo.
I'm Marlo Bluel, and you know what? I'm just going to let you guys nerd out now because they're sitting
No,
here and
Marlo,
talking
don't
about
leave
all the
us.
cool stuff, and
Don't
I'm
leave
just
us.
kind of like, okay.
No,
Well, no,
you're a
Marlo,
big
come
part
on.
of this. Your
No.
questions have been great.
So we want to talk about what's going on in the near term with both the Dynamo, with the Dash. What's on the horizon that's happening over here at BBVA? What can we expect to see? You mentioned the Copa coming to town. This is a real. The world is going to be coming to Houston this summer.
The world has been coming to Houston, and I think this is something we really have to hone in on here, is the amount of content now soccer-wise coming through here ever since the facilities and the infrastructure improved with BBVA Compass Stadium, and then prior to that, Energy Stadium. So,
Yeah.
I mean, just a couple of things off the top of your head here, and look, it's not just the Houston Dynamo and Houston Dash. We're fortunate to have two pro teams here, but it's Mexican League competition, it's international matches. Lionel Messi and Argentina were here. The Copa Centenario begins here June 3rd. Begins in the United States June 3rd. We were one of 10 cities to get it. And you don't get it unless you've got all these other great elements here, and that is people who care about the sport, TV ratings, infrastructure, diversity, Copa Centenario. We got the NCAA Men's College Cup right here at BBVA Compass Stadium. The NWSL Final. We'll have all kinds of other international content that will be introduced. And then you got all the home games of the Houston Dynamo and the Houston Dash. So it's a virtual
NWSL
cornucopia. That's
the Women's League.
Pro League, yes.
And so the Women's Pro League has picked Houston for their final.
Yep.
Hopefully the Dash will be in it, but whether they are or they're not.
Good incentive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Good incentive to be in it when you're hosting it, right?
Yeah.
that would be a real
I
incentive.
mean, I think the head coach, Randy Waldrum, was going, "Oh, thank you very much for that additional piece of motivation you've given my team."
Well, and what a team they've put together here. I mean, we've got arguably the best female soccer player in the world right here in Houston right now.
I don't think we can
mean,
argue it. She won the Ballon d'Or.
Yeah.
And she stood up with Lionel Messi on the world stage, and she's right here in Houston. And, it's great she's going to be here for the next 7 weeks before going off to get prepared for the Women's Olympics in Brazil. But but it's more. It's even more than just Carly Lloyd. I mean, that's the star at the top of the cake or the Christmas tree. But it's Morgan Bryan, who was so key in unleashing Carly Lloyd in that last World Cup, because you remember the U.S. was stumbling around a little bit in the first couple of games from an attacking standpoint, and it all took off when Jill Ellis moved Carly Lloyd forward and brought in Morgan Bryan. So the content is crazy good. We've got college programs here. We've got the youth and adult communities. We we just are really fortunate, and I hope we sometimes look back at that, because guys like me and a lot of my teammates and guys who played on the Houston Stars and the Houston Dynamos and even the Houston Hurricanes and the indoor team, the Hotshots here, they were very differing times. And as the tide rises, so do all the boats.
Theme of the day, right? Theme of the day. Always wonderful. I have to do this. Our producer specifically wanted to know this. If we say JC Superstar, who is she talking about?
JC Superstar. Johan Cruyff. I was about to say Jesus Christ, but Johan Cruyff. I mean, they're both in the same category, I believe. Johan Cruyff. Yeah, I mean, that was so sad, the passing away of
at a relatively young age.
Well, he was a chain smoker,
yeah.
Johan Cruyff was, and I've had ex-teammates who played with him on the Washington Diplomats. I had a teammate, Wim Serbier, here in Houston in the 80s that played on that famous 1974 total football team, which changed the game. And Johan Cruyff was a game changer. In other words, when you find these individuals and you know who they are in your worlds of whatever it is, literature, it could be music, it could be the food world, whatever it is, politics, there are people that can change the way we look at a sport. This man did that. He could be held alone on just his managerial career or his playing career. I don't think there's any other person in the history of the game who was as influential as Johan Cruyff as both a player and a coach. The only other one that would come to mind would be Franz Beckenbauer. And he won a World Cup with both Germany as a player and a coach. But I think Cruyff dedicated more time to being a coach, setting up coaching schools, moving the Dutch method to the Barcelona Academy, which has reaped us the Andreas and Iniestas. And so his reach is all over the world. And just a fascinating guy. And for the younger people out there listening, you should do a Google on him and look at some of the highlights of this guy playing, because his mind and his creativity and his brain was just something different.
Glenn, how many languages do you speak?
I speak two. I speak, obviously, English and Spanglish.
And Spanglish works.
Well, my ex-wife was from Mexico City, so I actually got okay for a while there. Mi español en este momento es no bueno para nada. That's not good.
How should we be promoting soccer? Why are we not able to get the word out?
Well, I don't think you have to promote it. I think it's up to the people that are in the positions of influence to promote it. And I think it gets back to that question you asked me about the Dash and the Dynamo. It's a daily push to grab momentum, to grab attention, to grab the media, to get cameras out at your training session, to find storylines. I mean, look, the Dynamo had a really poor game against the LA Galaxy. So as we prepare to do TV, we're finding storylines. And some of the storylines are not good storylines. That, like, this team has had...
What happened? What happened? I was not at that game.
Not much happened, except for the first minute.
That's a problem.
They came out and scored in the first few seconds. Did they just, slack off? Did they just get...
They came out, put together a beautifully scripted opening goal off a corner. Beautifully scripted. And after that, it was all downhill. Individual mistakes, collective mistakes defensively. L.A. dominated in every facet of the game. Steven Gerrard stood up here in Houston, unlike the last time he was here, and really led the Galaxy, along with former teammate of mine, Beto de Santos' nephew, Gio de Santos, who played up front. So it was just it's a tough night, but the Dynamo got 6 out of their next 8 on the road, and they are not a good road team, and it's got to change pretty quickly here.
Oh, wow. Well, Glenn Davis, thank you for joining us today. We do appreciate it. And if people want to learn more about you, is there someplace they can go, someplace they can follow you?
Yeah, they can go to our
media?
Facebook page, Soccer Matters. A lot of stuff over there, including my radio show, Twitter, Glenn Davis Sock. And, we all got to be in the social media game these days. So I have a lot of fun with it. Soccer's a fun game. It's a great game, and I'm glad I'm living in a place like Houston.
I'm Glenn Davis. Thank you for joining us.